Hello everyone. You're about to hear a short synopsis of the film Disciplinary Battalion. Enjoy! Franklin Bean's father was advised to send his troublemaking son into the army to straighten him out. A few years later, his father died, and Franklin came to his hometown for his funeral. Bean burst into tears and asked the deceased for forgiveness for being a bad son. The young man continued serving but went on a rampage. While on leave, he got tattoos on his wrists and stumbled drunk into a bar. There he began harassing patrons, and when military police tried to calm him down, Bean began yelling and jumping on tables until he fell through a window into the street. The young man is recovering in the hospital and hopes to be discharged as soon as possible. What can they do to him? But now it's time to hear the decision of the disciplinary court. Bean is sent to a 90-day standby duty. He loses his stripes and half his pay. He'll also have to have his tattoos removed within 30 days of the punishment. The other option is to be court-martialed and get 3 years. It was probably not worth fighting the military police, and no one will let Bean go home. He'll work 3 months on the farm, and then everything will be back to normal. The offending soldier was handed over to Staff Sergeant Otis McKinney. McKinney treated the new recruit well, but Bean wants out of the army and no longer intends to obey. Well, maybe the private will change his tune after spending the night with his roommates. Then he'll be more willing to cooperate. Corporal Lomar searched Bean and let him into the barracks, then closed the door again. Bean looked around and realized he was the only white guy there. The guy took the far bunk. "Don't you like black guys?" Corporal Stokes laughed. "This snowball is so stubborn, and those stupid tattoos on his arms too." Stokes is the block leader. He examined the new guy's belongings and took away his cigarettes. Bean was about to open his mouth, but Stokes beat him to it and introduced the locals. One of them was James Webb, a tough boxer, a Golden Gloves winner. And Sweetie stood behind him. He might not be a boxer, but he was just a big guy. Bean still gave back his cigarettes, and Stokes advised him not to become a solitary confidant. He didn't care that Bean was white. To Sergeant McKinney, they were all trash here. "I must admit, Corporal Stokes, you handled that diplomatically. Thank you, Brother Lowens." Every morning, the prisoner's wake-up call was as loud and uncomfortable as possible. At formation, Private Webb was immediately given a citation for a disrespectful look. Bryce received the same punishment for a loose thread, and Lowens for a poorly shaved face, and the eternal slob Sweetie received 3 assignments at once. Bin started showing off again and received 3 assignments for 3 words. Stock started singing a marching song. Everyone was enjoying themselves. But Bean doesn't get the joke. The kid is getting used to the local life and customs. The prisoners have been brought to the farm. Today they have to dig a drainage ditch and repair a fence. It's not like the men are working hard. Bean still keeps his distance. During lunch he approached Bryce, who was unemployed. Corporal Gessner pounced on him and gave him 3 assignments at once. For absence, for going into a restricted area, and for insolence. The prisoners returned to base. Sergeant McKinney personally searched everyone. Bean, through Lamar, asked him for permission to repair the mill. The boxer rummaged through the new guy's belongings. Afterwards, Bean noticed his gold lighter was missing and asked Webb to return it. "How typical of a white guy," the boxer said indignantly. "He sees a black guy, and the black guy accuses him of stealing." The muscle man pounced on Bean. He'd kill him if the white boy didn't apologize immediately. Bean turned his back on the aggressor, who kicked him with all his might. Stokes came running. He was about to sort things out. But instead, Bean responded in kind and slammed Webb into the wall. He figured he'd lost it. But Webb decided to have some fun and box the upstart. With a smile on his face, he knocked Bean out cold. Alas, the fun ended too quickly. The others helped Bean get up and wash up. The next morning, McKinney saw what he'd expected on his face. Bin must really like his neighbors. The sergeant would punish whoever did it if the private told him their name. But Bean lied and said he slipped in the shower, earning him a few more assignments. The entire squad was forced to lie down. Bean would probably be interested to know he was sitting here with a murderer, an extortionist, a rapist, a hooligan, and an arsonist. Now he knew a little more about his buddies. And while the guy was showing off, everyone would suffer. During lunch, Bean learned that the sergeant had forbidden him from tinkering with the windmill. So he sent a letter of request through Lamar to his superiors. Bin challenged Webb to a game of basketball. If the black guy won, he'd get $10. If he lost, he'd help Bean fix the windmill. It turned out the new guy was an excellent basketball player. The other prisoners were pained to see a white guy beat their brother. He'd disgraced our race, bullying Tox. No need to help him get up. That's how Bean gradually began to integrate into the group. He received permission to work on the mill in his spare time. One day, Bean learned that Lawrence had received a 7-year sentence. He was accused of rape. Lawrence said that during his leave, he simply slept with a drunk woman he met at a bar. The next morning, the woman sobered up, and her husband showed up. Lawrence, she said, immediately became a rapist. The next day, Bean and Webb climbed onto the mill and began repairing it. The sergeant watched them through binoculars. McKinney has a difficult relationship with his son. For some reason, the boy doesn't want to be as disciplined as the soldiers in the army. That night, Bryce confessed to killing a jerk who looked like McKinney. The guy pulled a gun on him. Bryce took the weapon and pulled the trigger. Now he'll probably hang. McKinney got really drunk. He decided to take it out on the private, who still wouldn't accept his authority. The guy started yelling and taking off his clothes. He wanted to climb over the fence and beat the shit out of Bean. But McKinney eventually puked and passed out. In the morning, Lomar asked Bean to bend over backwards a little. The sergeant was getting angrier with him every day. But the guy wasn't about to bend over backwards. As mentioned earlier, he'd chosen a team and was having a great time with them. Day after day passed like that. His black comrades taught Bean a special dance move for the march. A friend told him that Bean's battalion would soon be sent to Vietnam. He'll probably catch up with them when they let him out. So it's time to pray. Giant Sweetie has a beautiful voice and sings hymns for the soldiers. McKinney ordered Bean brought to him. The man has mixed feelings about him. He even rehearsed offering the boy candy. Bean entered the office. The sergeant said he wanted to settle his differences. They didn't get along from the start. McKinney learned of Bean's father's death and that his battalion was being sent to Vietnam. But the private refused the candy. McKinney is unhappy that Bean is fighting with him. For example, he was given permission to operate the windmill over his head. The pup, who hasn't seen life yet, is trying to make him look like a loser. McKinney's son is the same age as Bean. Is it really possible that he's more interested in making friends with people of color than with him? Bean replied that the sergeant was a boor and hated his outlook on life. McKinney was truly angry. The next day, he showed up at the farm and read out an order prohibiting the prisoners from activating the windmill. It was once again in the off-limits area. The men were upset, as at least they had some purpose in life. The next day, they protested by going to the windmill again. Corporal Gassner's threats had no effect, as they only had a little work left to do. The comrades worked a little longer and finally got the windmill running. Water began to flow from the well. Even Gassner calmed down at the sight of the machine running. They returned his nightstick. McKinney woke the offenders in the middle of the night and forced them to run out in the pouring rain in their underwear. Even Gassner got a tour of duty for not having time to dress. McKinney ordered the prisoners to be taken away. The crazy sergeant stopped, pulled the magazine from his rifle and tossed it aside. This is how McKinney gives the prisoners a chance to gain their freedom. The most daring can take advantage of this opportunity to take his gun. No one moved. Only Smallfoot wandered silently toward the windmill. He sometimes jams like that. McKinney called Bean over and asked what he'd accomplished by fixing the windmill. Suddenly, he pointed his pistol at the boy. The sergeant wanted to shoot Smallfoot, but forgot to insert the magazine. Then McKinney started searching for rifle ammunition. Bean shouted to the sergeant that Smallfoot was just a little crazy and wasn't trying to escape. But the soldier loaded his weapon and opened fire. A couple of bullets were fired at the others to keep them quiet. McKinney fired in Bean's direction. Smallfoot came to his senses and ran back. The sergeant pointed his rifle in his direction and blew the good-natured discharged soldier's skull off. Bean didn't have time to save him. Everyone burst into tears over the body of their comrade. The commander reduced Bean's sentence. He was released from the brig early. During the court-martial, every witness was questioned. Bean insists that McKinney should have fired a warning shot or said something first. Bean honestly admitted that the sergeant had called out, "Help," but he had said it while cursing at the magazine. He wasn't in a dangerous situation. He didn't really need help. However, this was enough to present McKinney's actions as justified. He allegedly fired 7 warning shots before shooting the prisoner. The black man hated Bean. He could have sent the sergeant to the gallows today, but instead, he saved him. In 2 days, the guy was leaving for Vietnam, but the prisoner still didn't want to see him goodbye. Bean threw the gifts on the ground. He stopped next to the basketball court, but his former friends didn't even look at him and walked away. After that, Bean wanted to talk to McKinney. The sergeant was sitting in a small room in his underwear painting a picture by numbers. He turned to the wall and Bean simply left the room. The private saw the prisoners again and saluted the flag with them. At least Gassner and Lamar said goodbye to Bean. But for his black comrades, he seemed to disappear. Only V called out to Bean to return the gold lighter. The boxer gave him some final instructions and wished him luck in Vietnam. There comes a time for everything, including forgiveness.